Outdoors with Tom Gruenwald is brought to you in part by HT Premium Ice Tackle and by Polar Fire, advanced cold weather clothing systems, and these other fine sponsors.
Mobridge, your all-season fishing destination.
境外大街进城方向都是车流集中，行驶缓慢。再次为大街进城方向都是车流集中，行驶缓慢。方向都是车流集中。
Hi everyone, and welcome to Tom Gruenwald Outdoors. You know, this is the show that thoroughly covers ice fishing. We discuss and review and go through every conceivable piece of ice fishing equipment, gear, tactic, and technique that we can. And we fish all sorts of species in a multitude of different locations using our HT Pro staff people, sharing the knowledge and just everything we possibly can think of involving ice fishing. And throughout the years, we've been in some really unique locations, but nothing as unique as what we're going to fish on today's show. Today, believe it or not, I'm just north of Beijing. That's Beijing, China. I've got right behind me here the China Wall. I'm driving north of the city of Beijing, heading toward a reservoir to do a little bit of ice fishing here, and stopped off on the way through just to visit and take in a few of the historic sites here. It's amazing stuff. Hey, if you really want to go on one of the most exotic and unique ice fishing trips you've been on, why don't you come along and join us here on Tom Gruenwald Outdoors as we go ice fishing in China. We're here in China and we're fishing on a reservoir, and as you can see, we're having some success. Just fishing microsystems and catching basically what would look like a standard lake shiner or smelt type minnow that we might use for bait in the United States. Just a very simple, lightweight micro polar gold rod, AccuCast reel, and I've got a real light sewing thread line and a little tungsten marmuska gem with a white crystal, and we're tipping those with bloodworms. And you know, I just wanted to stop and say I'm excited to have this opportunity to fish here in China. Back in the early 90s, I had the opportunity to go over to Sweden with Paul, the founder from HT Enterprises, and we fished a bore, they're called there, which are more like a North American yellow perch, and just had my eyes really opened up to a lot of new concepts and new ideas and new tactics that the Swedish team and the Finnish team, the Icelandic team, the teams from Russia and Latvia, it just brought a lot of new ideas. It really helped me expand my ice fishing horizons and try a lot of new things. And when the opportunity came here to fish with Jim Wong and Daniel Shi, Mr. Yin, and Mr. Lee, they came, they're going to show us a little bit of the ropes here in China. I'm looking forward to being able to learn just as much here as I did over in Sweden from them, and at the same time take the opportunity to share some of our tactics that we use in North America with them. Now they're using some spinning equipment like we are, and they've got some smaller baits and lures, but as I look around the lake here, I don't see anyone else at all that is using an underwater camera or a sonar unit, so I'm kind of looking forward to showing them how that works, and just, you know, letting them get a chance to try some of our tactics. It's really fun. We don't even have to speak the same language. I'll have Jim here, fortunately, helping us with translation, but we don't have to really speak the same language. Everybody speaks the same fishing language, and that gives us an opportunity to share ideas, and that's what fishing's really all about, and we're doing that here on a whole new level. So go back down and see if I can catch some more. We've got a little bowl that they gave me here to put these fish in, and we'll be right back after this to introduce you to our Chinese fishing crew right after this. Well, I'm fishing here with Jim Wong and Mr. Yin, and they're the ones that are really showing us how to do this and are really helping guide us basically out here to get to these fish. Of course, I've caught quite a few of the smaller fish with the tiny jig, and I've seen with the underwater camera and the sonar some bigger marks toward the bottom. So what we're going to do is try using a little bigger jig. I've just got a regular number 10 marmuska here, but trying to put these bloodworms onto the bigger hook is very difficult. So Mr. Yin is going to show us how they tie bloodworms onto the larger hook. got just a nice big glob of bloodworms all tied onto the larger hook. And we'll see if we can catch one of these. These cushion are probably, oh, there might be 4 or 5 inches long. They're a little bit bigger fish. And Jim, when I asked Mr. Yin if he think that hook size is appropriate for catching a cushion?
就那个汤问你，像这种钩型的话，可以钓那个鲫鱼吗
OK， 完全可以。
？So he said that's a perfect size for your cushion.
Okay, so we're going to give this a try then. Jim, ask Mr. Yin if these fish, the cushion will come up and bite further up, or if I'm better off to try to stay toward the bottom.
他刚才问你那个鲫鱼的咬食食性，它会跟着鱼饵慢慢上来呢，还是说它会待在底下不动这样子？
大部分都会待在底层。
Missing said most of cushion, they prefer to stay at the bottom. They will not follow the rules.
Okay. Using the North American approach here, and what I'm doing is moving a little bit. Mr. Yin suggested that because we had so many of the smaller minnow type species that we're catching in their hole, that I should come over here and try, because a lot of times if there's many minnows that are species, then the cushion or the bigger fish aren't nearly as prevalent or as apt to bite. So we're going to try this and see what happens. And again, I'm doing as they suggested, and I'm fishing close to the bottom. Now, one of the most important things that I learned from one of our good pro staff members out of Michigan, Dave Young. Dave said, you know, to be smart, Tom, when you're out, no matter how good a fisherman you are, is always watch and see what the locals and what the experienced people are doing. Watch how they're fishing, because you can learn a lot. And I've got a few gentlemen fishing around me here that have caught a couple of the cushion. And I noticed that many of them, they really weren't jigging or moving the bait much. They were kind of holding it still and just waiting for the bite. And there I had a nibble just off bottom. These smaller minnow type species have been just like when you're fishing smaller perch in the United States, it's kind of a dunk, 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 little bite. I'm hoping that maybe with these cushion, I'll get more of a solid strike like we would from a bigger bluegill or crappie. All right, well, we got a late start out here in the ice today. Obviously, we flew into China last night and got up this morning and had a long drive up here and stopped at the China Wall on the way. And we managed to get in a good couple hours out here on the ice, caught some of those smaller fish. No luck yet with the cushion. However, the good news is that these couple hours today were a bonus. We're going to be back out here again tomorrow and see if we can't get some of these fish. We're running out of light today, so I think we'll probably start wrapping it up here shortly. But we'll be back trying to catch some more fish here in China again tomorrow. Here we are in Beijing at Mr. Yin's Bait and Tackle Shop, and what's really neat about this is an entire complex here, and this entire facility has various outlet stores, so I can find rods, reels, nets, baits, clothing, whatever kind of outdoor stuff I might be looking for. Mr. Yin has a little bit of everything, so let's go in and check it out, see what he's got. It's late ice season, so we don't have a lot of gear left over, but we still have a few things. There's some of the ice rods, a few chisels left here, some skimmers, just odds and end things. But boy, it's really interesting. I would say 80 or 90% of the product that's on the shelves here is all some kind of fish food, fish attractant, or chumming material. You know, a lot of these fish that are being sought here in China are fished on large flats in channels and streams. So they use a lot of fish baits and fish attractants, and that's what I see on these shelves here. Sure is neat to be able to come over here and see how they fish in a different country, and again, try to take some of these techniques and some of these things, bring them back, possibly see what kind of applications we might have back at home. Well, yesterday we fished out here just for a couple hours, and we caught some of the smaller, what I were calling minnows, but Jim, you called those gong?
Yeah, we call it gong fish.
Okay. And I tried catching some of these little bit larger fish called cushion.
Yeah, cushion.
Okay. And Mr. Yin was explaining that it's better to not move the bait quite so much. I'm used to working the bait. He said with these cushion, you want to try to just let the bait settle. So we're trying this float, a little slip float, with the special rig. And Mr. Yin says the trick is to just, once in a while, just lift the bait, but try to more or less let it settle and let the fish come and take it. And I should expect that these little bit bigger fish will probably bite harder.
Sure, yep. Bite harder and then send back the float, then you set the hook.
Okay. Now some of these smaller nibbles are probably the gungfish again,
Yes,
right?
yep.
Okay. And it's interesting, the equipment that they're using here really isn't all that much different than what we might use. It's kind of an ultralight action or a light action fiberglass blank with what I would guess is about a 4-pound test line and a little bit big spinning reel. They probably don't have the real small ultralights like we use real readily available here. And we're still using the bloodworms, which he's tying on to a double hook rig. There's actually 2 hooks you're dropping down. And it's interesting, there really isn't any regulations at all, right? I mean, we can catch as many fish as we want here of any size. And there's no limit to the number of hooks we can put on.
Any size, no limit.
Okay. All right, so quite a bit different than what we would experience in the United States. Aha! I finally caught one. It's not a big one, but that's what they call the cushion fish, a little different species. And I've seen some maybe that are 6 or 7 inches long, so hopefully we'll get into a little bigger one yet. You know, we've been catching a few fish, and we're certainly getting an awful lot of bites. You know, these smaller gungfish and the cushion fish are hitting, and they're just taking the bloodworms off of the hook. So it's kind of exciting. There's lots of fish around, but as is so typical when you're fishing these smaller fish and using microsystems, they're biting very, very tentatively, very lightly. But I started moving around. We've got quite a few holes drilled in this area. Hey, here's one right there. Cushion fish, yep. Boy, they're kind of pretty. They're just golden colored. But what I've been doing is I'm moving around. I'm taking my my underwater camera, and I'm just kind of going from hole to hole, and I can see these fish swimming, anywhere from right off their bellies right down on the bottom to maybe 6 inches or a foot off. And then, of course, we can kind of move from hole to hole and drop down and try to catch these fish. But they're kind of pretty. They're kind of almost like a golden color. And I'm running the underwater camera. I can see these minnows and everything poking at the bottom. They actually are turned like this with their tails up in the air and their mouths turned down. And they're poking and they're feeding on those bloodworms down in the soft bottom that we have here. It's kind of a sand and a silt combination. But just you know, real similar to our little panfish, but quite thick-bodied. I mean, there's a nice little fillet on these. You can see why people enjoy catching cushion fish. We're coming back out on the ice again, and we're trying a little different location here today. We came out yesterday, started out with beautiful conditions, and I'll tell you, we're in a kind of a strange area. It's almost like fishing out in a desert or a real sandy field out somewhere in the Dakotas. It's It's a very hilly, almost mountainous kind of country with a lot of dusty sand conditions. And ironically enough, cold as it is, there really isn't that much snow. We had a little bit come down yesterday, but for the most part, when the wind starts blowing out here, it turns into a big dust bowl. I mean, there is sand blowing across the lake. It's blowing across the ground. It's coming off of the mountains, and it's unbelievable. And they're conditions that are almost impossible to really fish or film in. You can hardly breathe. There's so much dust in the air. So we came back in, and this morning we're trying a little bit new area. We're a little closer actually to the dam. This is a reservoir here that we're fishing on. And we're still fishing fairly shallow, in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 feet. We came out here, and there were some other folks that Mr. Lee knows, friends of his that had fished in this area yesterday and managed to catch a few fish. So we thought, well, we'll try something new. Another thing they were doing was using angleworms, or little earthworms, instead of the bloodworms. And so I've got on a little Marmuska tungsten dancer, the number 16 epoxy treble with a piece of angleworm on it. And I switched up my technique here a little bit, and I just put a Marmuska spring bobber here on the side of the rod. So now when a fish bites, it would just pull that bobber back to the rod. A lot of these guys are using the balsa floats and so forth, kind of weighted neutrally buoyant. And I just felt that maybe a spring bobber would be a nice super sensitive way to detect some of those bites too. Now I've been out here for about 10 or 15 minutes. I have not gotten a bite yet, but I dropped the underwater camera down, and I have had some of the smaller little wee fish, the real tiny minnows that we caught come through, and I've also seen a couple of the cushion fish down there. So I know there's some fish in the area. I'm not seeing as many here as I did yesterday. We actually had quite a few fish coming through pretty consistently, but it's still early in the day, and we just keep trying it and see what happens. There we go. Okay. Finally got one to bite. Just using the system that Mr. Lee has here, which is about a 28-inch light action rod. And again, they've got these slip floats and those little sheet weights that they wrap on the line, and a real tiny little light wire hook. And what they're using yesterday was bloodworms. Today, of course, these little pieces of angleworm is what they went with. But this is an extremely small, you can see that there on the camera, just an extremely small, super sharp light wire hook. There's no lead, there's no sinker or weight or anything on the hook itself. Just a real lightweight, tiny, tiny wire hook. And the weight is positioned above it, and that is used to counteract and counterbalance the float. And here's the result, the Chinese cushion fish. About the size of our North American bluegill, a little bit thicker body here in the tail. Probably one of the lightest biting fish I've ever fished through the ice. There we go. There's another one. Same system. Float, light hook, little piece of angleworm, and same thing, another real light bite. About the same size. They're running pretty decent, a little bigger than what we were catching yesterday. A lot of them yesterday were only probably 3 inches long. These are about the size of my hand, so good 6 inches maybe. There he is. They come up so fast. my biggest cushion fish of the trip. So I suppose I should give my tagline with that big one right there and say, nothing beats ice fishing, nothing. There he is. So there you heard it in Chinese, our tagline, nothing beats ice fishing, nothing. So till next time, no matter where Tom Gruenwald Outdoors and the show takes us, we're looking forward to seeing you. I want to thank Daniel, Jim, Mr. Yin, Mr. Lee, and Paul for a wonderful trip here in northern China. Ice fishing, we caught 4 different species of fish. We caught the little wei, we caught some whitetail, the cushion fish, and of course quite a few of the gung fish. So 4 different species, and those are the primary ones that we do find here in this area of China. So we've had a successful trip. Hey, no matter where the show takes us next time, thanks again for joining us here on Tom Gruenwald Outdoors.